Hello, welcome to The Long Road. My name is Chris Roberts. I'm here with my guest,
Kelly Steiner from Monadnock Voices.
And Patrice Streifert from Hinsdale Community Coalition and the We've Got Your Back Coalition in Winchester.
Today's going to be kind of a tough subject. It's one of those things that no one wants to really talk about because we always think it's someone else's problem. We all have perfect kids. None of our kids get in trouble. And in a lot of ways, I think because we're so naive, we don't prevent our kids from getting in trouble. That's where you two ladies come in, correct?
That's correct. I'm with Monadnock Voices, and we're a regional network that is working on reducing substance abuse across the Monadnock region. And it involves 32 communities, multiple partners, including coalitions, government, education, healthcare, business, concerned citizens, and many, many parents. So there are parents that are concerned out there. We are focused on reducing underage and binge drinking in 12 to 25-year-olds. And one of our partner coalitions is two of them actually, are the Hinsdale Community Coalition and the We've Got Your Back Coalition in Winchester. And Patrice will be talking more about those. As we engage in reducing substance abuse, you talked about it being a hard issue to talk about. One of the things that we found in collecting information from the Monadnock region is that there's a very low perception of risk of the issue. People don't think it's going to affect them, or they think they can keep their kids safe by hosting a party, for example, at their home. So we have been focused on working on access and availability to alcohol and reducing the consumption patterns because we have a high rate of binge drinking in the area as well, and then increasing that perception of risk. So, we're funded through the Department of Health and Services, through the Bureau of Drug and Alcohol Services, and when we think of the regional aspect of this, we like to think about acting regionally with that, but thinking locally about what we can do and really engaging the people that live right here in our own communities in solving the problem.
And before I go to Patrice, when you're talking about the availability, and at my house, up over the refrigerator, we have a shelf. My wife likes margaritas, so there's tequila and some of the other stuff, and you have some wine when you have guests. And I'm pretty sure a lot of parents have that. But all of a sudden, as the kids grow up, or the grandkids grow up, and you leave them home a little bit more, somehow you think they don't know where it is, or they're never going to touch it.
We've heard from a number of parents who've been surprised when they open the freezer and find that their alcohol is frozen, which typically alcohol would not freeze. However, when it's been mixed with water, it will. It definitely is one of the access points for young people to be able to get into the liquor cabinet. We always recommend that people lock it up or not have it in the household, particularly as you get into the teen years with your children. The other thing is that friends are a big provider, and people that are hosting parties who may be of age but are providing alcohol to people that are not of age.
Well, and one of the things that Kelly mentioned was the perception of risk. So that is a big factor that we're working on, and as well as what are the protective factors, what are the things that would keep kids from wanting to drink alcohol or binge drink. That perception of risk that we're working on, we've actually been surveying kids with the YRBS survey, which is a youth risk behavior survey, for about, how many years now? We've been doing it in Hinsdale for at least 7 years, six or seven. We're doing it tomorrow. And basically we're seeing that is going down, whereas in, I think it was a little over 40% of kids, we're now at about 24%. So over the last 7 years, we have seen that perception of risk is changing, so that there are some risks involved with drinking alcohol, particularly binge drinking. And so I think that's one of the things we in the community are beginning to see the work is paying off, because we're also working collectively together. As Kelly said, we've got a regional group, but we also have a drug-free coalition in Hinsdale and Winchester now. It's our first year in Winchester, but it's been 7 years. So I think the vision that Joe had, who's the vice principal in Hinsdale, is really paying off. To have the school, the community, us all working together, that collaborative approach then changes that perception that, yeah, it's not what everybody does. And so I think that's made a difference.
When I was first on the school board, when we got that youth at risk survey, there was a heated debate on the school board whether we should even show the parents, because
Exactly.
some of the members on the school board were aghast by some of the contents in there, because it's just not drinking with cigarettes and sex and other drugs. And it was, to me as an adult, is why should we be worrying having an argument as an adults when the kids are at risk? If we're afraid to address it, how are we going to prevent the children from overcoming these difficulties?
And we have to remember that with things like the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, it's a reflection of our larger community. It's certainly not a reflection of the school. Because learned behaviors are occurring out in the family, in our community environments, and in the school environment, certainly. So that's where the regional partnership is so important, to involve all of these different facets of our community, because it's really what's going to make the difference in influencing both decisions that young people make. And our young people in surveys have said that parents are the most influential person in their life. And we've got to remember that as parents. And I think sometimes we forget and think it's their peers or the environment that's around them, but it's actually kids say parents are the number one influence. Yeah,
because I was surprised, because when it came to alcohol, the kids, 88% of the kids said it was their parents that developed their outview on alcohol.
That's correct.
So 9 out of 10 parents, they can't put their head in the sand because they're having an effect.
Exactly.
That's correct.
One of the things when you talk about binge drinking that I found really shocking, it's a little bit off, but I was going to the Pumpkin Fest last year, and I'm walking back, and there's 4 girls, they're 4 college girls. And one of the college girls says, I got so wasted last night, I didn't even know where I was. I just woke up on the couch, looked around, and got up and went home. But when you look at it, I have 3 daughters. I would be totally shocked if one of my, she could have been raped, so many things could have happened, and she had no idea what happened. She couldn't even be able to go to the police. And to be able to think that you can binge drink out to a point of blacking out, but say I only do it on the weekend so I don't have a problem?
I think binge drinking is an interesting piece of what we see in our culture now, and there's a number of things that affect that. One, our environment, happy hours, different activities like that where people can overconsume. We've also seen among young people that because they have designated drivers now, it's almost like giving permission to everybody else to drink too much. And so we've seen an increase in designated drivers. That's the good news. The bad news is that the people with them are generally drinking more than they should be. And as you said, putting themselves at risk for some harmful situations, whether it be violence or crime, but a number of different things.
But even if you're a designated driver and you have 4 or 5 buddies in your car that are wasted, if they're puking or they're yelling, you're a distracted driver. You're not paying attention to the road. It's almost like being a parent with 5 toddlers in the car and trying to keep your eyes on the road.
And, certainly that's an issue. Also, the responsibility for the person who may have had too much to drink and their safety. Because you almost assume that if you're the person in the vehicle with them. And unfortunately, we see situations, you read them in the newspaper, where people don't take care of a person and they may end up in the emergency room with an overdose, that type of thing. So, being aware of your environment and being aware of how much you're drinking is really critical for people that are of age. And if you're underage, it's against the law, of course. But the other piece of that is that you're putting yourself at risk in numerous ways. There's a lot of studies now that show that addiction occurs for people who start drinking earlier. So, the age of onset is an important piece because of the way the brain is developing. So if a person starts drinking at 12 years old, they're 25 times likely to become addicted and become alcoholic later in life. And if we can delay that onset, the longer we delay it, the more the brain develops and the more the decision making and pleasure center develops.
So Patrice, you're talking about the Hinsdale, and you talked about the community. But a lot of times people think everything just comes from the big city and filters out.
No, I think that was Joe's vision and at the school to involve with the DFC grant and the school that we do. As Kelly said, the environment is such a big influence. Parents is certainly top, but peers, what happens in the environment is really important as well. The binge drinking, what I see on the college level is that kids don't drink to be social anymore. There's a goal of how drunk you can get or how wasted, as you say, you can get. And that perception, real or unreal, is what gets created at middle school, high school level. And for kids that are thinking about going on to college, they have that perception that that's what it's about, And so I think one of the things that has been good for the community in terms of the DFC grant is that we've done both in school and out of school. We run an out of school program as well. And so kids are getting that message through several different programs that we're running now. One's Media Power Youth, which is a proven program. We've got Guiding Good Choices, really is for parents and teens from 9 to 14, I believe it is. Mm-hmm. So we're targeting certain populations so that those protective factors, if you will be more prevalent. So that kids will be less likely to start drinking early, less likely to drink till they get drunk, that whether that parent is a social drinker or whether they're is also an influence. But we've got Project Venture, which is a new program that we've been doing last summer, and we've seen some good results with that, where kids are making choices around how they work together as a team, how they respect each other and respect themselves. So there are a lot of programs that not only are in school, but they're out of school and summer. So you're getting the, big picture and the small picture too. You're getting kids that are seeing positive role models. We've had great success with our AmeriCorps Vista program. We've had kids come in and do everything from our All-Stars program, which is also another proven curriculum. We're running that with a girls group, which you're really talking about, what can happen when you drink too much, when you get a reputation of being a drinker. So we're beginning to see some of the real fruits of the labor, so to speak, in Hinsdale, but that's been a good 7 years now. Winchester, we're just starting the drug-free communities, but also we've been working in the community for a long time with after-school programs. But the bigger picture, I think, is the vision for having a healthier community overall, where drinking and substance abuse is a part of that. We're also looking at lots of other ways, with healthy eating,
You don't even have to do a lot of research to prove that if kids are actively engaged in doing things, whether it's after-school programs, sports, glee club, or whatever, drug abuse and drinking doesn't seem to be on their mind. But right now we're in a brutal time where at the state level, county level, we're looking at doing away of with a lot of these programs, but we're not reducing money to put them more into jail. So we figured, let's get rid of prevention and then pay on the other end.
It's unfortunate that that's the direction New Hampshire's heading right now, because it does mean that the need is not going to disappear. And we can either proactively take measures to engage our youth in those positive things and have positive change occurring in their life. And even if they do head down the wrong road, being able to intervene at a point that could potentially stop them from that addictive behavior. So, as we're losing that, we are going to pay on the other end. And it's not going to be just in jail. It's going to be in our emergency rooms and in our healthcare system, because the effects of addiction obviously lead to things like heart disease, cancer, diabetes, a number of health issues. So somewhere we're going to pay. So you can choose to switch the financial resource that may be paying that, but we are going to pay. And I often think if we do that, we're potentially going to lose those young people that we could have stopped the behavior before they ever really got into it.
The a lot of times the topic of the shows I like to get is based on a lot of my life experiences, to be able to let the people know. We know I was telling you before, I have 4 brothers who are addicts. 2 of them spent one for attempted murder, the other one spent for, again, attempted murder, 4 years in Walpole, maximum security, which is not a nice place. I have a brother now, my second to youngest. He's a methadone addict. He's heroin, but he goes every week to get his methadone. Excuse me, and he's collecting a Social Security disability check. He has now become, due to his addiction, a non-productive member of society. And it could have been prevented. And every time we can do something to prevent the child, so he's going to spend the rest of his life on the government's taxpayer rolls with never putting a single penny in. Prevention or the back end.
Right.
I think we made a lousy deal in that case.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, advocacy is so important in this time. I would really say to people, get involved. Whether you want to be involved in figuring out what's going on here in the Monadnock region, or involved in the boots on the ground, working with one of the coalitions who are actually, doing the compliance checks and working with law enforcement, or trying to teach people about social host liability and what it means if you decide to host a party for underage kids. So advocacy, critical right now in this budget cut season, and you know that it's occurring here at our local level through our counties, certainly at the state level, and it's occurring at the federal level.
And because we're talking about, I was looking at your 82% of the underage kids drinking said they believed that no one was going to squeal on them and no one would get caught or no one would get arrested. And most of the time, those no ones who are going to say anything are adults.
Exactly.
They're parents. And you were talking about, well, if I host a party, they drink at my house, at least they won't be outside drinking. Well, that's against the law.
Right.
And it has some serious consequences.
And in our surveys with parents, 89% of them said they would want to know if their child was drinking. And kids said, 88% of the kids said that their parents would not like their decision if they chose to drink. So it's really important for people to realize what kind of influence they hold in people's lives, how they can be involved in the community, and to make sure that the services are there to be proactive with our young people and to intervene where needed.
And the cost piece that you were talking about in terms of looking at national cost, it's about $510.8 billion is what the estimates are of how much it costs the nation in terms of substance abuse. And the savings from that are estimated that we'd have about 8% fewer youth that aged 13 to 15 that would be engaged in alcohol with the work that we're doing. So there's a direct relationship between what we're spending, as you said, in our emergency rooms and what we're able to do prevention-wise to keep that age of onset from being 12 and 13 years old.
We currently in New Hampshire spend about 22 cents per youth that we have to be involved with in terms of prevention, intervention, or treatment. And we spend about $8.95 for judicial-related crime activity and things associated with substance abuse. So, the savings is about $8.73 per person in our society. I think people lose sight of that in the budget cut season. The other thing is, alcohol is the #1 revenue generator in the state of New Hampshire, and we bring in approximately $500 million through our sales of alcohol. And only 1% of those funds actually go back out to working with our young people to make sure that they're making good decisions around that.
And that comes to the hypocrisy of the House just voted to reduce the cigarette tax by 10 cents a pack. Mm-hmm. And the Senate's probably going to go along with it. And the excuse was, if we reduce it, more people will buy cigarettes. But then we'll cut H&HS, so we won't have alcohol or cigarette prevention or cessation programs. But then we go and say we want to reduce alcohol, we want to reduce tobacco, but in a lot of ways, the State House is addicted to the money from the addiction they sell.
It is. It's a vicious cycle. It is hard in this society when there's such a capitalist, when how you look and how much money you have is what's affecting our young people. So it is tied into that view, I think, of why they participate in some of the activities. You know, so that's why I feel like I'm beginning to see the Media Power Youth, the kids that are working in those programs that are really deconstructing those images of what the media is trying to tell them to drink, to smoke, to, you know, what's sexy, and it's really, they make their own messages now. They get to, through this program, decide on what do they want to do a PSA about. How do they want to look at their lives in the future, trying to figure out, okay, do kids have an idea of what they want to be in the future? And when you talk to them, one of the little girls, I have to take this story, on the playground in Troy, the Vista staff was working with them, and she said, what would be the first thing you would do if you were president? And she said, this is a third grader. She said, I would ban all smoking. Both her parents smoke. And she's nervous that something's going to happen to her parents. So she's even at third grade, there's a message out there that it's not. That was around smoking, and we're talking about alcohol. But I mean, I think that we're all working together in the coalitions to try to build that message and those protective factors that say to kids, you know, there are better choices. You can make other choices.
And I just wanted to say, Chris, that there's been a lot of controversy about why do we continue to have a problem? Then, you know, if all these things are going on, why do we continue to have a problem? The reality is it does work. There is a lot of influencers in people's lives, you know, whether it is the environment, their families, whatever it may be. But we were able to show recently when we really focused on alcohol the last 3 years, we have seen a 12% decrease in consumption among young people in the last 3 years if we really focus on this effort. And this is the collaborative partnerships that Patrice is talking about as we really do that. The other thing is we've seen an increase in the age that they choose to start drinking. And that is good news. Of course, we would love it to be over 21, but you know that's what we're working towards. So I think you know we've got to focus on the positive here. We've got to continue to work together. Collaboration in this time of less resources is critical to us. So we invite people to get involved. This is the time.
You hit it that a lot of people like to focus on the negative so as not to justify. A couple of years ago when we had one over at the library and we were talking about it, and I went to the individual and said 2 out of 10, we grew up on welfare, 2 out of 10 made it. And he says, well, that's an 80% failure rate. It doesn't justify spending the money. Well, if I retire as a Marine Colonel, I've had a positive effect on a lot of people's lives. My daughter is a nurse at Maplewood and she's getting ready to go for her RN. If I would have ended up like my brothers, none of that would have happened. So yes, you go in because I made it and one of my other brothers make it. Our kids are not going to be addicted. We're not going to be alcoholics. Not going to. So you got to go that way. That irritates me if people go and say, "Well, you have an 80% failure rate," but the 80%, but that 20% going forward makes the failure rate smaller and smaller and smaller.
And that's what we're seeing happening.
Yes.
And so I mean, it's too bad that the budget cuts are falling the way they're falling because the work, I think in this region, I've been in here working for about 15 years, but it's a collaborative region for the most part. I mean, there's anything we've ever asked for in Hinsdale, people say yes. Winchester, it's my first year working with DFC there, but people say yes if you need them to step up to the plate. Communities are wanting to provide those kinds of services in the community that really benefit youth, that benefit parents. And I mean, parents are working both jobs. They need after school. After school to put prevention work in after school makes sense. Is they're getting that message during the day, and then they're getting that message when they're after school. So you're right. That 20% or whatever percentage it is, as we're moving, makes a huge difference. I mean, I grew up alcoholic father and family split up, and but I didn't take that path. I mean, I had influences and those kids need that same kind of influence.
I was up at the State House, and we had an individual who says, cut. He says, I've had to work hard. I pulled myself up from my bootstraps and everything. And he goes, you know what? I'm sick and tired of everyone else. They need to work just as hard as me. And then I looked at him, I says, but who gave you the boots? And his mouth just stopped. He goes, what? I says, who gave you the boots? I says, if you're going to pull yourself up from the bootstraps, someone had to give you the boots. And he was like, isn't sometimes government's responsibility to give people the boots? What they do in them is their own responsibility, but someone had to give you the boots. And he just got upset and he walked away. He had never thought about that because it doesn't matter if you pull yourself up. Someone had to give you that start. And I think that's part of government's responsibility because when you look at the people that you're trying to help, some of them are the most vulnerable people there are. They're in broken homes, battered homes. When you look at how many children, families get abused and beaten in alcoholic relationships, how many pregnancies, like the, what's that, Brad Paisley song, he's on the button a lot of times and he does it in a joking manner, how many pregnancies were started under the influence of alcohol. But we don't want to touch it because those people are not going to put the suits on, they're not driving up to Concord, they're not going to put an articulate letter in.
Right.
And I think in a lot of ways we're failing them.
Yeah, I think that's the interesting part. I mean, some people might say they don't even have straps. Never mind the the boots. Because you see families struggling right now for just to, I mean, working 2 jobs, 3 jobs, some of them. So those programs for kids as well as families, the Guiding Good Choices piece. I was thinking as you were talking, the parents that took that course, we paid them to take it at I think it was in Hinsdale. And we ran a program in the spring, and those parents were so appreciative. They wanted to keep getting together just so they'd have a forum to talk about these issues because it was so helpful to hear other parents say, yes, I'm having the same problem with Johnny that you're having with Jill, and how we solved that problem together was so meaningful. So it was the course and the curriculum provided that sort of commonplace. But then to have them say, let's keep going. And let's bring the kids. Let's go sledding. While they're sledding, we'll have our talk. And
you're right about the Cheshire County Monadnock area. This is a whole community.
It is.
They work together. Whether it's 2020 visioning, the Keene Rec Center that brings other people in during the summer program, so parents can work. But it is really, and then to go what you just got talking about, Head Start. When you go, my granddaughter went to Head Start, my next granddaughter, she'd go. When you go and see the difference, not just only from the children over the course of the year, of the parents, the involvement that's required by the parents. For some of these parents, that's the first time people are saying, hey, you can do it. This is what you need to do to make your child's life better.
And grandparents. You'd be
Grandparents
surprised at the number of grandparents that come to these programs that are raising kids.
That's right.
And they're excited to have a network or a group of people that they can talk to and feel connected to. And whether sometimes some of them will volunteer in the after-school program now or come in and do a program here and there. But it does feel like there's movement in that population, of not just parents, but sort of that.
Because there's a lot of kids, especially single parents, who they can't afford rent. They have to go live back with mom and dad. Not because they wanted to.
Yeah.
So we're going to go to a break pretty soon. We're going to have 2 more new guests. And so you have anything you want to close up with?
Swamp bats? No.
Well, what I would like to say is get involved. There's so many ways to be involved. It could be just giving your voice to thinking about the needs of the Monadnock region. It can be actually doing the work, whether that's working with law enforcement or the coalitions or whoever that may be. And we encourage parents to get involved, think about the choices they're making, and especially if they're deciding to host a party or anything like that. There's legalities involved in that, but there's other options available to them. So, get involved, be part of the solution.
Right.
So basically, children do copy what you do, not what you say.
Absolutely.
Correct.
Okay, I want to thank both of you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Chris.
You're okay. Now we'll be back in a few minutes with some new guests.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm Jeremy Call, and I made suction tires. Wait, what? Wait. I used a rivet gun to connect the suction cups, and then I just connected it to the tire. I got the idea from an octopus because of the suction cups, and I don't know.
Anything's possible. Keep thinking. Get started on your invention at inventnow.org.
Explore new worlds. Read. Visit literacy.gov and let the journey begin.
The forest is special, magical, and very precious. One careless act caused by people, and its beauty could be gone for a lifetime. Protect our friends in the forest.
We'll all pitch in.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
To find out more, log on to SmokeyBear.com.
Well, welcome back to The Long Road. We have two new guests.
Jeff Drake. I work for Monadnock Family Services. I'm a parent outreach educator there, and I'm spending a lot of time in the region now teaching a course for parents called Guiding Good Choices.
I'm Officer Parker from the Winchester Police. I do the youth aid grant. I just got this year, so I'm looking forward to working in the community and in the schools to help get the kids on the right track.
We were talking earlier with our two guests concerning the importance of parent and community involvement. So that's your area of expertise, correct?
Yes, that is correct, yes. Parents, it turns out, we think about protective factors and risk factors when we think about kids and drinking, drugs, tobacco. And so there's a lot of factors that create risk for them. Just the presence of those substances in the community would be one. But it turns out that parents actually are a tremendous protective factor. So if they can understand how it is that they're a protective factor, they can really put into place a lot of things that will then help protect their children from those particular risks. And I can give you an example if you'd like.
Yep.
Yeah? Okay. Do you remember when they first started doing an effort to make teenagers be aware of the dangers of drugs and alcohol? They thought if they explained to them how dangerous they were, that would do it. They would then see the risk and not do it. So they came up with that campaign, This Is Your Brain.
Yeah.
This is your brain on drugs, with the fried egg, and and that didn't do any good. So so they tried something else. They asked the kids, well, where do you get your drugs and alcohol? From my friends. Okay, so we'll train you to say no to your friends. So then we had a long time of just say no. Okay, also, it didn't do any good. Then researchers started to talk to the kids who weren't doing drugs and alcohol. How come? And they all said the same thing. They said, because my parents will kill me. Okay. Now, their parents weren't armed. They weren't dangerous. They weren't even scary. What it really was is their parents had been clear. We don't want you to do this. These are the specific things that we expect you not to do. So that was one thing that parents can really learn about and get clear about. The second thing is that what the children were saying is they didn't want to upset their parents. They were close to their parents. They cared about their relationship with their parents. So the combination of having been really, really clear about what they wanted and keeping their children in a very close, respectful, and warm relationship turns out to be the most strong protective factor that there is. And so Guiding Good Choices is a 5-session program that helps parents understand what the problems are and the risks are to their kids, how they can get clear about taking positions and talking with their kids in an effective way to come up with a family policy. And then the rest of the program is about how they can do things in the family to keep the kids close, bonded, and secure, and teach them a lot of really great skills about handling tough situations.
And one that goes to your area is if I'm a parent and every time I sit down to watch a sporting event, I have a 6-pack of beer. And every sporting event, especially on ESPN, there's all this commercial 6-pack of beer. So if I have a 16-year-old son, I'm teaching him, whether it's subconsciously, if I'm going to watch a baseball game or a football game, the whole experience involves drinking a beer while watching it.
Right. But it's all about perspective, though. I mean, like you were saying, if the parents educate these kids and these kids know the difference between what's right and wrong, or something to look forward to when I'm 21 or what have you, then hopefully they'll, it's that learned behavior, So as far as my position is concerned, I'm working in the school where these kids are not yet, they're 18. Their Winchester school is K through
K through
8, yeah. And so I don't get to see these high school kids. I mean, I hear a lot about them, but I don't get to see them. So I'm trying to educate these young kids in hopes that it's more of a preventative action, and educate them that this is not the reality, and we can help change this whole perspective that these kids in our local community in Cheshire County are troubled children, because they're not. So
well, sometimes when you try to do something to prevent something, people then get the false impression there's a bigger problem than it actually is. We were talking before about all these teenagers, underage drinkers, who are now getting to visit Judge Burke.
Yes.
And they're from around the county. But people go, well, last year we only had 10, so this year 30 sent the underage, so we must have a big problem.
Right.
You're just trying to correct the problem.
Right. And we don't actually have that much of a problem. I mean, I was telling you outside that there's 4,300 people in Winchester. That's the population average, and there was only 43 juvenile complaints in one year. So that's only 1% of the population, which is not. It's nothing.
I'll take it anytime.
Anytime, absolutely. So, I mean, the overall perspective has got to change. I mean, the reality is it's not really that big of a deal. But if we can, find the problem and resolve it before it happens, that's where my hopes to go. Because I don't want to keep Judge Burke busy, but if I can do that, then I've done my job. So
we were talking earlier that about 80% of the kids said, hey, so what if I drink or I'm at a party drinking? We're never going to get caught. No one is ever going to squeal on us. And when I used to be a kid, it was like, I need an excuse not to do this. Mm-hmm. And so if you're talking about if mom is going to, or dad's going to be pissed at me and is not going to let me do this, mm-hmm. or there is a greater chance that I'm going to get caught, I now have an excuse to tell my buddies, nope, we can't do it. It's going to be a dumb move.
Right. Well, with technology these days, there's ways to find out where parties are, whether it's Facebook or friends or teachers. I mean, people post anything on Facebook. So we have this party patrol, which is sponsored, to go out and search for these parties. And the parties are, like I said, are listed on Facebook. Parents, teachers, they'll call us and say, hey, there's a party at this house. I choose to remain anonymous. Can you go check it out? And we'll go do that, and like I said, it's a preventative action, but it's also getting the community involved and help preventing these parties, and hopefully that it will pass on and the kids will find out and hopefully not have these parties. And so,
your example is a really good one. I like it because you talked about parents have an opportunity to actually provide their children with a reason for not going along. If their friends all say they're going to do something, it's hard when you're a teenager. There's a strong drive to kind of stand up in a certain way and be recognized as a person in your peer group. So that is a risk factor for all teenagers. Mm-hmm. What is their peer group doing? And what kind of norms are there in their peer group about this? So we're all going to have a beer is one of those things. And at that point, though, one of the nice things about Guiding Good Choices is that we actually teach parents that those situations are coming up. And we teach them before they come up. We start with like 4th, 5th, 6th grade parents so that we can help them work with their kids on specific skills. What do they do when somebody says, come on, let's go riding in the car? We teach them, well, what's going to happen? To ask questions. What's going to happen in the car? Who's going to be there? Do you have permission to have that car? As soon as they hear that something's trouble, they name it. That's illegal. That's against the law. I could get in trouble. That's drinking. So then they can also teach them. So they name the trouble, and then they say, well, you know what? My family has a policy against that, or we don't do that in my family. So they have a kind of a place to do that, and also to redirect the situation. Like, I have another idea. Instead of going and getting in the car with those guys over there, why don't we go down to the park? We'll do skateboarding and stuff like that, or we'll go to my house and we'll do some video games. So they don't have to lose their friends. They don't have to do that just say no thing, which didn't work, but they can actually take control of the situation and redirect it in a way that is more comfortable.
What are some of the legal consequences for a parent having a party at the house?
Oh, legal consequences for a parent. Depending on if the parent's there or not. If they're the host of the party, obviously there's going to be legal consequences for hosting the party. But we also, again, like I mentioned to you, we have this thing that paperwork that a parent can fill out if they go on vacation or leave for the week, saying, you can check my house freely, go into my house without a search warrant or whatever have you, because their kids are troubled kids and they're not trusted, or B, their friends are, not trusted kids. So we can go over and legally search their house and look for these parties, and because who wants to get in trouble for their kid hosting a party? So that hasn't been really let out in the community. We've mentioned it, but I hope that more publicity as far as that goes. We'll get more parties this summer. I just got hired in December, so it should be interesting summer. So,
but if I'm a parent and go, well, I know it might happen, but I'm not going to be there, so I don't have any legal responsibility.
Oh, but you do, though. You do. You know it's going to happen, so your obligation is to report it. And if it does happen, yes, you do face legal consequences. So if the parents is willing to accept that, but then again, there's only so many police officers on, and so many 4,300 people in the community. So if 30 people are having these parties, and then there's another call for something else, it's hard to you got to outweigh the pros and cons and so on and so forth.
I noticed that the liquor enforcement, state liquor enforcement, with local communities have been doing more stings, and it's amazing. Outside my house, you'd see them, but you still see people going in and underage drinkers buying booze or going into the local pub right next to my house. And it's like, the cop's right there. But they'll go in, and it must have been 3 or 4 cars just got towed away. The blue lights came on, then the tow truck came. What are some of the consequences for an underage drinker getting caught?
Well, there's many different programs. As far as 21 under, you're an adult, 18, so on and so forth. But before that, there's CHINs, there's juvenile delinquency, and then there's a diversion program. And the diversion program is made for people that don't have this behavior, this consecutive behavior, and the diversion might throw them into some sort of community service or drug counseling or alcohol whatever have you. And my hopes, I would like to send everybody diversion, because the community service piece is so important. I mean, if they could come down to the community and clean up the streets with all the trash, or volunteer. We have a couple nursing homes in the town. Want to come down and serve lunch or something. Make them look at what they did negative, what their negative was, and create a positive out of it. So they don't have a chins until they're 17, and they're not a delinquent until they're 18. Who wants that? So, I mean, it's all about preventative actions and preventative steps, and I hope that I can do that.
So some of the other stuff the parents can do?
Yes, absolutely. One of the things that there are some statistics, like if the earlier you start to be involved with any kind of a substance, the likelihood that you're actually going to have a significant problem with that substance goes up. So that if a 13-year-old starts, experimenting with alcohol, there's a 50% chance that child's going to become addicted to alcohol or to some other substance. We make parents aware of that early age being a difficulty. The other thing is there's some really nice brain research now that's very enlightening about the adolescent brain. The brain does not stop developing actually till it's 25. And all throughout adolescence, the brain is going through a huge transformation. Okay, it's very vulnerable at that point. A substance going into an adolescent brain is very different from a substance going into an adult brain. And because it's changing so much, you can really then do something damaging to that child's development by the substances going in. So when a parent needs to have a reason, why is it okay for me to have a beer when I'm watching a game and not okay for you? Parents that have had a class like that in Good Choices or get the information from other source understands that your brain's different. Your brain is not ready for these substances. Adolescents' livers do not process alcohol the same way, and so they can become addicted, drunk, have an adverse reaction much more easily. So it's very important that people get educated about, there's nobody's telling parents what's right, what's wrong, but giving them information about the situation so that they can make an educated choice about how they formulate a family policy about what's okay and what's not okay for their child. And a simple way they might do that is just to go back to your image of the dad watching the game, and there's a beer there. Well, it's very important maybe for a parent not to say, would you go get me a beer? As opposed to, I'm getting my own beer because it's an adult thing because I'm an adult and that's a decision that I've made. And so not to include them in that particular process. And then to have a conversation with them about why it's different.
And maybe sometimes as a parent is, maybe I can push off this beer for an hour or two until after the game. I can sit here with my son and daughter and just sit there and talk about the baseball game or the football game without having to keep swigging on a beer.
There's a lot of advertising that, as you said, that teaches you to associate pleasure and activities with substances. Even just sitting down and watching those ads with your kid and talking about what the ads are doing, because it's true for a lot of things. They slip those particular images in there. So not being susceptible yourself, thinking about your children, being vulnerable. Not just to what happens in your house, but what happens in other people's houses, what's happening out in the world. It's a good way to think about it.
We were talking earlier about one of the easiest access for underage drinking was the parents' home. Have all these bottles here. We have it left over from the office party or the Christmas party, and just thinking that there's no way in the world that my kid or my kid's son or friends are going to access that alcohol. Big mistake?
I think so, yes. Anything that you have in the house, I think we were all kids. Anything you have in the house, they're going to investigate and understand about. And if you haven't, one of the things I think that you can really think about as a parent, or that we can help parents think about, is address the thing ahead of time. You don't have to wait until something bad happens. You think about it and talk about it. And think about what kind of position you're putting your children in by having those particular things in the house. And if you haven't had a clear conversation with them about things, then you're actually allowing that risk factor and not putting in place a protective factor. So you're always thinking risk factors, protective factors. So I think that's parents' job. And it's actually harder than it sounds. So I don't know, I've been a parent, I raised 3 children, and when I got to a point where a lot of times something came up, I realized, wow, I hadn't thought about it, I was a little tongue-tied, I started to say one thing and realized, there was another way of thinking about it. So, or the other thing that can happen is mom and dad can be on a different page because they haven't had the discussion about what do we do about alcohol in the house. So it's really actually important to take some time and think about this and realize there's a lot of ways of thinking about it, but you need to come to some conclusion yourself so that you can get clear about it and then set some family policies.
Well, I know we're talking about alcohol, but when we're talking about the home, you've got unused prescription drugs, and you've got some heavy-duty narcotics. You've got inhalants. You've got cigarettes. And there's so many things. I may say, well, you know what, it's a little vodka, no big deal. But if my kid went up to the medicine cabinet and got some Vicodin and took Vicodin and a couple of shots of vodka, that's serious. That's life-threatening, but I never put them together.
Absolutely.
Right.
I think parents should take the onus amongst themselves and, lock up the liquor cabinet, hide the prescription medication, explain. I mean, there's a commercial on TV I just saw today about this woman was, smoked for 27 years, what have you, and she kept telling her kids as they were growing up, don't ever smoke, don't ever smoke, don't ever smoke. And these kids, they don't smoke. Just to see their parent go through these changes is, because smoking is just detrimental, and then not want anything to do with it when you get older. Smoking is one of the biggest problems, especially in this community, amongst juveniles. Change that. Every time I see a JV kid, I kind of do the first strike, second strike, third strike, you're out, you're getting the violation. But, the first time I see a kid and I see him smoking, I say, don't you think that's gross? Like, what girl's going to want to date you, or what boy is going to want to date you? Try to give a different twist. And then, then I explain to them, the next step is I call mom and dad, and they get a little hefty fine. Are you okay with that? And they're like, oh, no, officer, I won't do it. So it's about communication is huge, and education is huge, and parents need to take responsibility, lock up that cabinet, or get rid of their drugs.
And go ahead.
Well, I was going to say that last week I was at a small seminar that we had here in town about treatment, and prescription drugs are the fastest growing area of abuse that they get in treatment programs now. And kids are having parties where everybody brings a pill, and they throw the pills into a pile and they just take them. They don't know even what they're taking. It's just a little bit of a game. So it's a very serious thing. And I want to mention, if it hasn't gotten mentioned before, April 30th, there is a drug take-back, so that if you have prescription drugs that are sitting around your house that you're not using, this is a way that you can actually get rid of them so they don't pose that particular danger.
Matter of fact, on the week prior to that one, we'll have a show covering the dangers of prescription drugs, the take-back. We'll post it so everyone knows where they can go and drop them off, because it is really dangerous, and people just don't seem to understand. And so what's a pill here, what's a pill there? If I keep hitting this one. I had cancer and I broke my back, and I was on morphine. And it's like, you know what, holy crap, you just can't leave morphine around the house. Right. What if happened if one of the grandkids took it, so it's a small pill, and popped it in the mouth? So I get rid of it, but I don't think parents understand some of the dangers.
Right. No. There's one thing that I think is very helpful for parents to think about, or anybody in the community that's doing this, is that all of the risk behaviors that our teenagers might get involved in, anywhere from the drugs and alcohol and tobacco to also things like early sexuality, vandalism, crime, school failure, they all can be addressed at the same time with the same interventions. So in some way, if you want to think about it, is when you help a child make a good decision about tobacco or alcohol, you're also helping them make a good decision about whether or not they're going to have sex, protected sex, what's going to happen, whether they're going to shoplift or something else like that. So parents can be very crucial in protecting their children from everything.
Got about a minute left. What else you want to add on the lawsuit?
No, I was totally gonna agree with you. If parents can help the situation before it gets to us, that would help our job. And me being in the school, I hope it's going to show a different perspective of law enforcement. I want to be a positive influence, and hopefully the parents will see that I'm taking this time in the community to be a proactive member and make those preventative steps. So,
go back to where the cop on the beat was the community, involved in the community and preventing problems from happening. Got no great deal in arresting everybody just for numbers' sake.
Absolutely not. I would rather communicate with somebody than throw the cuffs on. I think that's going to be more of make a difference than throwing them into the judicial system.
And has a much more positive effect on an individual's life. For example, if I get arrested, I couldn't go into the Marine Corps Officers Program. So that was a deterrent for me because I had set a goal. And I think as parents, one of the easiest way to keep kids off drugs and drinking is have a defined goal where they want to go in life and say, these are the consequences of making bad decisions.
Choices. Yes.
Right. So I want to thank you both for being on the show.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
And we'll get together on the prescription drug buyback.
Great.
And so thank you again for listening, and we'll see you there on the long road.